Hello and welcome to the demo video for the rented item manager. Now this part of the video that you're listening to now is actually added in afterwards because I've done a few updates to this product. So I just want to let you know right at the beginning of the video, if you're watching this video and you see, hang on, you've got a few extra columns in that you don't see in the demo video, go towards the end, listen to the video, watch how it works, but then when you're done, just pop towards the end of the video because I'm going to edit in a little section towards the end where I'm going to explain what all the updates are, because I'm not going to reshoot the video because 90% of it is the same. They're just a few extra columns. So if you're wondering why you've got extra columns on your spreadsheet, just go to the end of the video and I will do a little insert there as to why those extra columns are there. So back to the other video now. What is a rented item manager? I suspect this is probably going to be quite popular amongst possibly the building industry or the trades where they're renting equipment, machinery, that kind of thing. But it can actually be for anybody, any business who is regularly renting items. So you've got stuff that you've rented for a day, a week, a month, whatever it may be, and you need to obviously A, remember to return it, but also B, just to track how long you've had it for and how much it's cost you compared to what you initially planned to pay for the initial rental period. So, if you're renting one thing every blue moon, is probably not going to be helpful to you. But if you've got a number of things rented at any one time, this will be quite useful for you. Let me go through and explain how it works. The first page is the settings page. All that's on here are categories. So categories it can actually be anything you want. The only thing I would suggest not categorizing it as is where you get the item from, because there is a supplier list as well where you can put suppliers in. So any other category, this can be, I don't know, if you've got 5 or 6 different staff members and they're each renting different things and you want to monitor by which staff's got what item, or you can maybe categorize it by a type of machinery, the type of machine that it is. Maybe it's for a different department of your business, whatever it may be. You've only got 10 options, so you got to pick carefully. But however you want to categorize each of these rentals, you can do it in here. So you just type in 10 different names of whatever categories you choose. Now each item can only be categorized to one category, so you can't have kind of the first 3 as staff, the second 3 as departments, that kind of thing. You've got to pick one category, but then you can list up to 10 categories that fall that how you want to categorize each of these items, and each item rented you can assign to one of these categories. Why are categories important? Well, really just for the reporting at the end where it breaks things down per category. So for argument's sake, if you're renting 5 different types of machines, the report will then show which of those types are more likely to be needed longer than you originally rented it for, that kind of thing. So that's why it's maybe useful to categorize it, but quite what you categorize it with is up to you. So that's the first page. There are only really 2 tabs where you can input data. Then there's the archive and the 2 reports. So the first one, let's start with the easy one, is the supplier list. Simply name the supplier. You can put in a contact name, so for the person that you would normally talk to, maybe a landline, a mobile number, an email address. Those are just for your records. They're not going anywhere. It's not really doing anything other than just being here available for you so that you can see who it is that you talk to. The important thing is to put in a supplier name and a unique supplier name. Then what will happen is the green headed columns. The green headed columns are usually formulated cells. The red ones are the ones you fill in. So what will happen is it'll count how many you actually have currently listed on the rented items. It'll also count what the initial plan was. So what was the initial cost that you planned for each of those suppliers? What is the actual or budget? Now the actual budget, budget or actual. The budget is what you currently due to pay for it based on extensions that you may have had as far as rentals are concerned. And then, or if you've returned it, then it uses the actual figure. And then what is the difference? So this difference actually shows how much are you over budget, initial budget being the initial plan. How much are you over budget with each of these suppliers? That's what that's going to, and it'll keep a running total. So this will update as you update the other list. So this list is fairly static. All you do is add a new supplier on when you get a new supplier, and you can come here to see these figures as and when you need to. This is the page where all the data entry takes place. So this is where you track all the items. So let's just go through one column at a time. First of all, hired item, you can type in the name of whatever this item is or whatever it is you have. You've got a code or whatever it is that you do, just something to identify the item that you've hired. You can then select the categories, and the categories, remember, the ones we did on the setup. So however you want to categorize it. You can then select hired from, and you can select one of the suppliers. If the supplier is not on the list, add them on here, and then they will reappear. You can then sort you can click on here to sort A to Z, so you can put them in alphabetical order. Select the next hired from. Then you put a start date and an original planned return date. So all of this from here to here is a setup at the beginning. So what it's asking you is, when did you initially plan to rent this? Now, sometimes a rental item, they could say to you, for example, you pay £100 for the week, whether you have it for 1 day or whether you have it for 7 days makes no difference. You pay a fixed fee. Or some of the other ones could be this is the price. It doesn't matter how many days you take it, but this is the period that you got it for. However it works out, I've tried to cover all the eventualities, so I'll show you how it works. If you put in the initial start date, basically when you're going to go pick this item up, and when you're due to return it. So this is the initial loan period, because normally you would say, okay, I want it for a week or whatever the case might be, or even if you don't necessarily have a set time, put down what you think that ought to be. Then you can put here your cost for your item. So this section here, these three columns here are to do with this initial start date. So is it a fixed rate? In which case, just fill in the fixed rate, and that's done. You can see I put in £100. That's £100 from the 7th to the 11th of December. No questions asked. It doesn't matter how much per day. They're charging £100 for that period. Here, what this one does is, actually that one's wrong. That shouldn't be 30 there. That should be 30 over here. This one is saying, for example, cost per 20, £20 for 1 day, £80 for 7 days, £10 for 1 day, so on and so forth. So if it's £10 a day, £10 1 day. If it's £80 a week, £80 for 7 days. You can put in whatever combination you want there to show how much this is actually charging. Then what you do is, what is the cost for extensions? So the cost for extension doesn't have a fixed price because there's no fixed date. What the cost for extension does is goes, if you keep it 3 days overdue, for example, what are you going to pay? Are you paying another £100 per week? Are you paying £25 a day? Whatever the case may be. So then you can come in and put what your cost for extension is. It may well be the same as the initial, but I put them down twice just in case it wasn't. Maybe you got a cheaper deal for the first week and then it cost you more, or more expensive and cost you less, however. So you can put in the extension. So what you would do is you would fill up to that point when you add a new item on. I would imagine you put all this information in. All that's left to do now is to put in an extended date or the actual date when you return an item. So let's just say, for example, here, because I've put, well, first of all, this will change color when I get to the time. So you can see here I'm in extended time for these three. Here I'm in the initial time, and there I've returned the item. So what happens if we're now on the 10th of December, so this is the 11th is something due. Now I've got the day's warning set at 0, so this will only flag up on the day when it's due to return. If you say, well, hold on, that's not enough time, I want to know 2 days before, whatever, you can put it in here. So if I put 2 days before, all of a sudden there it says action due on these 3 items. So why is the action due on this item? Well, because we're now on Thursday, the 10th of December, but this is saying that tomorrow we're going to need an extension, because this one needs to go back. Now you may look at this and go, that's fine because we're going to return it tomorrow, in which case you can leave it. But then like these ones, for example, where it says Friday the 11th, this is saying we need a return date, extended return date required, because we need an extension on this particular rental. So then if I come in here and go, well, yes, actually that's right, I am going to want this for longer, but I'm going to want it until the 15th of December, for example, then as you put that in, it disappears, because it now knows that, all right, now it's recalculated and gone, okay, now we're going to recalculate using these values to see what you would be paying until the 15th of December. So they're still in the initial time, but you've already updated the return date to beyond what that initial contract period was. So that's how it works, and it's a live document, so in the sense that every day you come in, these could change. The statuses could change as you reach these days, but those will update as you go along. The only thing that would change is if you get to the end of this one. So for example, Friday the 11th of December, this needs to go back tomorrow. If I still need it longer, I'll simply extend that period and go, actually, I'm going to return it on the 15th of December. So then it gives me some more time. But obviously, that's going to take into consideration the costs as well and show you. These end formulas here are all calculated, so it'll show you what was originally planned to spend, what your current planned is, so in other words, compared to these return dates, what you've actually spent to date, i.e. up to this day that we're currently in, and then when you return an item, it fills in the actual figure. It shows you the actual figure that you got there, and then your budget, what you are over budget. So that automatically calculates, but what we've got, so all you need to do is fill in the return date when it's returned. Once it's returned, that item's actually returned and it's now done and dusted. Nothing else happens to it. It's gone back. So what are the other pages? Well, your dashboard one is, it says one action due, and the reason why there's one action due is because this one's due and we haven't done anything with it yet, so it'll show up as an action due. If we were to take that back to the 15th of December and we go to a dashboard, that disappears and says no urgent warnings. So these are warnings that will show up from your rented items page. Then it shows how many items are currently in initial time, how many are in extended time, and how many have been returned. And it gives you a breakdowns, the original value, current value, based on the items that fall into each of these three categories. This over here is a total for all items, what you are over budget. This doesn't necessarily add up these three because it also takes ones that are currently listed as warnings as well into account. So it may not necessarily tally up, but most of the time they should. So that's just a dashboard page which you can visit at any stage. It's automatically calculated, so it updates as these items update. It's just an overview so you can see where you are and if there's anything urgent that needs your attention. The other one is a report. So this is also updated, but what it also does is it also gives you some kind of retrospective type of look. So you can see all the different statuses, incomplete, action due, and so on, how many are there, and all the values for the current plan, to date, actual budget, and then as a percentage. If you scroll down, you can see your categories, how many of each you've got, what was your initial budget and over budget. So you can see which of these ones. So this was a count, the number of items. So there's two each, so each of them have got equal representation. But here you can see that was the initial budget of all the categories, and this was the actual what we've gone over budget. So you can look at that and go, hang on. The red one here, category 1, is quite a small actual initial budget, but it's taking up a lot more of this graph, and that to me would be a red flag, and I would then start asking questions as to why this category 1, why do we have such a low budget for it, and we're actually spending going a lot over budget. If you scroll down at the bottom, you've got some of these figures as well, so you can see per category what was the average initial and over budget for your current values. What are the ones that you've returned, and then the ones in the archive. I'll get to the archive in a second, show you the values here, so you can see what your initial value was compared to your budget, and it shows as a percentage. So for argument's sake here, category 1, the ones that we've currently got on this list that haven't been returned yet, we have actually gone 941% over budget, which is huge, and we really should be looking at that, figuring out what's going on. So the archive tab. The archive tab is simply because if you're going to have a whole lot of these rented and you keep adding onto these, eventually you're going to have a whole bunch of returned items that you don't necessarily need on this list. Now keep in mind, when you do move them from this list onto the archive list, when you go to things like the dashboard and reporting, they won't be on this reporting, and they won't be here anymore as final values. They would now move across to the based on the archive results, the value. So you've just got to keep in mind. In fact, here you can select which lists do you want to include in these figures. You can include either the rental items only, i.e. these ones over here, or you can include the archive items only, i.e. this tab over here, or you can include both lists. So you can select which one of what you want to appear in these graphs. But just bear in mind, obviously, the reporting may change when you move them across. But let's just say you want to remove these ones across here. If you now come and select from there across to right the way across, even the green ones, all the way to the end there. If you right click copy and you go to your archive, you select here, right click, paste values. So now you've pasted those into this other spreadsheet, into the archive. And you can come back here. Now you've just got to redo it again, because now you don't want to do the green one for the second one. If you go to here, right click, clear contents. Now you've removed all the ones that have been returned, so you can keep this list as lean as possible. As I said, if you want to keep them on the report, keep them for a short while, but when they get much older, what you can do is you can come and you can just sort by return date to bring all the old ones at the top, clear those ones, and then resort alphabetically or by start date or however you want to do it. But now once they've been moved across the archive, what it means is that the spreadsheet's not doing as many formulas trying to keep track of this, and you don't have this list building up and building up. And now you'll see on the report, now there's stuff in the archive and there's nothing completed on the main list. So yeah, I hope that that's helpful. Some of this reporting on the dashboard you may not necessarily need, but yeah, I think if you are having to manage a lot of rented items, I think this could really help you, and I hope that it does. And earlier I said that there were some extra additions to this new version, so let me just show you what they are. There are a few more categories. There are now 15 categories available, whereas in the original there were only 10. But the main difference is all on this tab. There's now a hire ID column. Initially I would take the hired item and the category to see if there are any duplicates, but now I'm using the hired item and the ID, because obviously each hire you could get an ID. You could hire the same item multiple times, but each with a unique ID number. So there's an ID number, hire item. That's the main change. Obviously you can select up to 15 categories. The other big change is the on hire and off hire. I had someone contact me obviously saying that, hang on a second, you've got all the options here for the cost, but sometimes there's an on hire and off hire, a cost to collect the item and return the item, which you have to pay both of those regardless of what happens here. And also obviously they want to be able to see that, because it may be more cost effective just to keep the item if it costs more to take it back than it does to rent it for a few days. So there's now an on hire and off hire. Whatever you type in there, it'll literally just get added to each of these ones, because whatever happens, you're going to have to get it and take it back again. So yeah, those ones will be added on. And then the only other change are the notes and comments. I've got a column at the end here if you want to put some notes and comments in. That's it. Those are the changes. The only changes to the report are merely cosmetic ones. Obviously, these graphs have changed slightly. I haven't got all the color keys on both of them because they're on this first one, and now they're 15 instead of 10. But those are the only changes, just really cosmetic on the report. And the archive obviously has the extra columns in as well. So those are the only changes. Those extra columns on hire and off hire are the only ones really that make a big difference because of the price. And then the hire ID item goes together with the hired item, and then the notes column. So those are all the extras. I hope that all makes sense. So if this is for you, I wish you all the best. If this spreadsheet, if this gives you some ideas as to what you'd like to do, but this one doesn't quite cover your situation, get in touch. I'm sure we can chat about making a customized one. But if this one works for you, then yeah, I really do wish you all the best with your business. Thank you very much, and goodbye.